The story begins on a beautiful morning with Elma, who, while running through the trails, gathers some leaves and spices she finds to take home. Back home, she gathers a few eggs from the coop and starts making breakfast in the kitchen. She brings the sample over to Tobias, her husband, for his assessment. Several years ago, Tobias was startled awake by Almut's distress in the bathroom. She was feeling the initial pangs of pregnancy, and bewildered, he rushed to her aid, quickly grabbing his notebook to document her symptoms. Right now, Almut is busy in her restaurant, effortlessly displaying her skills until a sharp pain forces her to halt. Accompanied by Tobias, she visits the doctor, who advises chemotherapy to reduce the size of the inoperable tumor. The goal is to slow its growth and prepare for surgery. Following surgery, she's advised to continue treatment to avoid any future complications. Standing beside her, Tobias discusses the next steps with the doctor, inquiring about any potential impact on Almut's work. Due to the stress of her job, the doctor recommends Almut take some time off. As they leave the office, Almut suggests getting a dog to help their daughter overcome any difficulties she may face. She believes that grieving for her pet could help her cope with the possible loss of her mother. A confused Tobias questions if she's really planning to euthanize a puppy to teach their daughter a lesson. Almut hesitates, unsure if she wants to endure chemotherapy again, calling it a horrifying experience she'd rather not repeat. While they both hope for a successful treatment, she voices her concern about its possible failure. Tobias, picking up on Almut's emotions, understands that she prioritizes meaningful time over simply spending a lot of time. Determined, she replies. She wanted to make the most of the next few months and enjoy every single moment. Almut ultimately clarifies that she isn't completely dismissing the treatment, but wants to explore all of her other choices. A message from an old friend pops up on her phone while she's back home, mentioning a potential cooking competition. The story goes back in time. Waking up in his room, Tobias put on his most stylish suit. His father asked what he wanted for breakfast, and at his job interview, he proudly introduced himself as a Weetabix employee, highlighting his role as master data manager and expressing his ambition to advance within the company. Back in his hotel room, he discovered his pen had broken, leaving an ink stain on his shirt. Hours passed, and our protagonist sat down to look over the divorce papers from his marriage to Helen. But he couldn't sign them. His pen was broken. The one in the room was broken too. His frustration grew as he searched for something to sign. Even his pencil broke. He finally went to the supermarket wearing only his hotel robe with the sole purpose of buying pens. Back on the street, he was struck by a car. As consciousness returned, he realized he was in a hospital corridor, facing an unfamiliar person. Realizing he was awake, she told him there were no beds left. A slightly stunned Tobias asked, "Where are my underwear?" The woman tried to joke about the cookies he had with him, but he didn't laugh, so she introduced herself as Almut, and he responded with his name. Tobias didn't recognize her and inquired about their acquaintance.
I ran you over.
Alma apologized, taking responsibility for hitting him. He reassured her, telling her not to worry about it. Wanting to get to know each other better, they decided to meet up that same day at an old-fashioned diner off the highway. Tobias said he worked for Weetabix, and she mistakenly thought he meant the cereal company. He explained that the company owned the Weetabix brand. Despite his restrained smile, they started to joke around, and he inquired about her life. Almut mentioned that she's opening a restaurant, aiming to put a modern European spin on classic dishes. Her opening is just a few weeks away. She felt obligated to invite him and extended the invitation to his wife as well, noticing the wedding ring on his finger. Time has passed, and we find the couple taking their daughter out to dinner to share significant news. The parents try to explain to their daughter that her mother has a bad tummy ache, but a waiter interrupts them, trying to cheer her up. They tell Tobias to go, but instead he shouts at him. As they played, neither he nor his daughter noticed Almut watching them with a profound yearning. "It's time for bed," declares the main character, but her family ignores her. So she sets off on a playful chase, trying to catch them all. After reading her daughter a story, she finally tucks her in. Later, in private, she tells her husband he's done a great job. Tobias is relieved they abandoned the plan to put the puppy down, and in the bedroom, she reveals she's been pondering a passionate, intimate farewell before her grueling treatment begins. They surrender to each other immediately, embracing every scar, mark, freckle, and imperfection. Finally, Almut reveals she's thinking about Simon's suggestion to try out for a cooking show. Tobias soothes her, saying that they'll have time for that later when it's appropriate. But for now, they need to focus on relaxing and getting ready for the treatment. This couple had been preparing for Almut's arrival years ago. Tobias indulged her every whim, even as she began experiencing discomfort during her workouts, meticulously documenting each symptom. The doctor urged them to go to the hospital, but they discovered their car was trapped in the parking lot when they went outside. Tobias assured his wife he'd find a solution, but even he was feeling the strain. He carefully maneuvered the car out, trying to avoid any problems, but Ahmed's labored breathing worsened, making him desperate. With a surge of energy, he pushed the cars out of the way, creating some space. At the hospital, a nurse gave them the good news that everything was fine, but their protagonist was only 2 centimeters dilated, so they needed to go home and wait. Returning to the present moment, Almut inquires with one of her chefs about their knowledge of the Bocuse d'Or competition, which has piqued her interest. The chef compares it to the Olympics of cooking, minus the big prize, and they whisper so the other diners can't hear. She expresses her desire to compete this year for Great Britain, adding that she'd be thrilled to have him on her team. Jade is surprised by the news. Almut cautions him to consider all the implications, particularly the demanding training involved. However, her new partner readily accepts the project. Tobias reminisced about the time he got a haircut at his father's place, prepping for his friend's grand restaurant opening. Dressed in his finest suit, he arrived and immediately noticed her. However, a woman at the entrance halted him, inquiring if he had a reservation. He knew she recognized him from the accident, so he tried to explain, but she cut him off, pointing to a table set for 2, implying she knew what was going on. He seemed a little nervous. He was served a selection of fancy appetizers, which he gobbled down in a single bite, even though he seemed captivated by their flavor. Almut came over to say hello and asked how the food was. He immediately told her it was fantastic. She was sorry his wife couldn't join him and inquired about everything being all right at home. While Dubais insisted they were still legally married, they acknowledged that their relationship was effectively over. Almut was delighted by the news, and they planned to spend more time together later that evening. The evening flowed with laughter and unexpected connection, until Tobias, looking concerned, confessed that he hadn't used protection because he'd been out of practice. Almut, however, just playfully teased him before revealing her own supply. They woke up together the following morning. Tobias was the first to wake up. He rose silently from bed, gathered his belongings, and cast a final glance around the room. His eyes fell on several boxes, likely packing crates filled with memories. Then Almut's voice startled him. Saying goodbye, he explained that he needed to leave. But she was confused, asking why he was going if she hadn't asked him to. Tobias suggested that if she was free, they could spend the day together. Their day was filled with shopping and leisurely walks in the park, their easy connection evident in every shared moment. Tobias confided in her that his relationship with his ex-wife had been strained, but things went downhill after she took a job in Sweden. Despite their efforts to salvage the marriage, Helen ultimately grew weary of trying. Almut shared her own experiences with eggs, then promised to make him the most incredible scrambled eggs he'd ever tasted. She suggested cracking them on a flat surface, and Tobias, utterly enthralled by her words, leaned in for a kiss. They ended up on the carpet, completely undressed. As they said goodbye with a tender kiss that day, the door to her apartment became a barrier between them. Though separated by wood, they lingered, both lost in the same shared feeling. They started meeting more often. Late one night, following a party, Tobias, reminiscing about their late-night talks, boldly told Alma that while she might not be passionate about kids, he felt they were something she was naturally good at. Slightly confused, Almut admitted she didn't understand what he was trying to say. Tobias stated that he'd prefer an uncomfortable conversation now rather than a destructive one in 5 or 10 years. Still confused, Almut urged him to relax. In a surprising moment of openness, he confessed that he might be developing feelings for her. The words stunned her for a moment. Alma made it clear that she wasn't the kind to believe in love's promises of the future, and she honestly felt it would be better if they parted ways. Returning to the present, Alma drives home. As she places her belongings near the doorway, she's met with a delightful surprise, a path of candles guiding her towards her husband, who stands there with a welcoming smile. With their daughter finally asleep, Tobias brings up the tense conversation they had on the day she was diagnosed. Deeply affected by the situation, he apologizes for his panicked reaction during such a frightening time, wishing he could express his true feelings now. With trembling hands, Tobias flips open his notebook, his eyes scanning the words he'd written. But the emotion overwhelming him, he can't bring himself to read them. Witnessing his struggle, Alma tenderly took the notebook from him, reading the heartfelt message he had written. Tears welled up in her eyes as she finally told him they shouldn't waste any more time. Reaching into his pocket, Tobias retrieved a ring. Kneeling before his wife, he sealed their eternal commitment with it. Years ago, Tobias had been rejected, and now, heartbroken, he left her apartment. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to see her again, so a few days later he snuck into Almut's apartment by following a pizza delivery guy. Unaware of the delivery guy's awkward glances, he entered the office and was immediately spotted by one of Almut's colleagues. Suddenly, he understood that he had stumbled upon a baby shower in her apartment. Upon seeing her, he offered a heartfelt apology for the intrusion. Tobias shared that while driving by her restaurant, his thoughts had become clearer over time. He admitted that he was still wounded by her earlier reactions, which had felt like a harsh rejection. He also realized he was sorry for focusing too much on an ideal future, forgetting to appreciate the person right beside him in the present. Right now, the family is heading out to the garden to give their daughter a haircut, creating a fun and memorable moment. While his wife tucked her hair into a small box, Tobias was captivated by her growing beauty. They later tour a huge museum, pondering it as a potential wedding venue. However, learning that drones are prohibited, they immediately choose to depart. On the same day, Tobias escorts Alma to the clinic for the start of her private chemotherapy treatment. Although the setting is chilly and unwelcoming, she confronts it with bravery, even though it starkly symbolizes the potential consequences if the treatment fails. A few days later, Alma and Jade had their initial meeting with Simon. He and Alma exchange polite greetings, praising her recent success and admiring her new haircut. Though Simon's familiarity might make her uneasy, the protagonist remains composed. Right at that moment, Jade saw that Almut was bleeding from the nose and alerted her. Rushing to the bathroom, she finds the bleeding is heavier than she expected. Using a tissue to clean herself, a wave of nausea washed over her. She sheds her uniform for relief, barely starting to feel better when Jade bursts in, announcing they need to leave. Seeing Almut looking unwell, he nervously inquired about any special precautions she was taking. Almut chuckled at his question and explained that she had been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. The news clearly affects him deeply. He wants to delay the competition, but she insists she's prepared to compete. With Jade's assistance, she quickly changes back into her uniform and takes her place at the end of the line, prepared for action. Later, Ahmed is at home reading a message from Simon. Simon congratulates Ahmed and tells her the final date has been set. She seems utterly exhausted, though. She tiptoes past her daughter's room, checking to see if she's asleep, and then joins Tobias, who is reviewing potential wedding invitations. He feels like something is wrong with his wife, but she simply says she's tired. During Almut's pregnancy years ago, Tobias would assist her with bathing, and they'd navigate her intense food cravings together. Before that, after a period of separation, Almut's family and Tobias's father reunited at her apartment. Initially, Tobias and his father had to stand out in the midst of the family's lively chatter, but the evening quickly transformed into a warm exchange of stories and laughter. Reginald could pinpoint the precise moment he knew he wanted to marry his wife. He emphasized to her that he didn't need a formal ceremony or witnesses to feel dedicated to her. Almut experienced an embarrassing moment when her family showed an old video of her figure skating competition. Tobias's unease made our protagonist realize that Ahmed hadn't completely revealed his past to him. She decided to be open about that part of her life. Her father, who she had loved deeply, was always there for her, a constant source of support until he became ill. Feeling helpless and unable to assist him, she made the difficult decision to take a break from skating. She realized after her time away that returning to the ice without him felt impossible. A sudden, intense pain shot through Almut's abdomen, growing unbearable. They immediately rushed to the hospital. The doctor was direct, stating his suspicion of an infection, but emphasizing that further tests were required for confirmation. While jogging in the park a few days later, Almut received a call from the hospital. Tobias was told that while no signs of infection were found, the doctors recommended a hysterectomy, a procedure to remove the uterus often used for cancer treatment. Tobias fell silent after hearing this. He just received the devastating news that his soulmate had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. Sitting together, they reviewed the information, facing the grim possibility that having children might not be an option given Ahmed's likely need for multiple rounds of chemotherapy. The alternative, however, was a life-saving procedure that involved removing her uterus and one ovary. Though she was worried, Ahmed hoped to keep at least one ovary. Despite remembering all the things she'd said, she still clung to the hope that the cancer hadn't spread to her remaining ovary. Though she never envisioned herself as a mother, the image became increasingly clear with Tobias by her side, and he was moved to tears as she shared this revelation. A few days later, Ahmed received the wonderful news that she was in remission, so they decided to have a small celebration at home before heading out to the fair. The main characters were overjoyed as they shared the attractions together. Upon their return, they began trying to have a baby. While it didn't happen immediately, they remained hopeful and persistent, trying with renewed determination each day. Alma's treatment was becoming increasingly difficult, with each passing moment bringing the same discouraging results. Yet, against all odds, they finally achieved the desired outcome, experiencing a feeling of indescribable joy. Moving ahead a bit, our protagonist waited for the perfect moment before leaving the house. Stuck in traffic on the way to the hospital, Tobias's anxiety intensified as he listened to his wife's labored breathing. Curious about the delay, he hopped out to investigate. However, when he saw that the situation wasn't improving, he returned to his car looking visibly frustrated. Almut had vanished from the car, much to his surprise. He panicked as he searched for her and found her leaning against a gas station pillar in the throes of labor. She decided to go into the store to find something to satisfy her craving. She calmly browsed the aisles while Tobias appeared to be the one on the verge of giving birth. She finally reached the register to pay, while Almut kept looking for something to eat. Concerned about her extended absence, he went to find her and discovered she was in the bathroom. She called out to him from outside, saying she didn't feel well. She initially thought she just had to use the restroom, but now she felt the urge to push. Despite being stranded at a gas station, Tobias immediately contacted the doctor to inform her that the baby was on its way. Almut was ready to start pushing and began taking off her clothes without caring about the gas station workers close by. Tobias told her he could already see the baby's head while the other woman helped our protagonist, and he was getting instructions from the doctor on how to assist his girlfriend through the process. Even though his logical male mind didn't allow him to grasp every instruction right away and understand how some things worked, Tobias put in his best effort to help her until he finally got to hold his daughter in his own hands. The baby's cries echoed throughout the bathroom, a sign of relief and joy for the doctor, who then knew everything had gone well. Our protagonists couldn't hide their excitement, and even the gas station workers shared in their happiness. The doctor assured them that an ambulance was coming, but until it arrived, Tobias needed to stay calm and keep his family warm. The heartwarming moment extended into the car, where he expressed his gratitude to the employees with a final wave before finally embracing his little family for the first time. Unfortunately, the present doesn't live up to the brightness of those cherished memories. The doctors informed the patients that they couldn't shrink the tumor, and the spread of cancer made surgery impossible. However, treatment options exist, and they encourage patients to stay hopeful. Alma may struggle with sadness, but Tobias is always by her side. The doctor assures her that it's understandable for her to not feel okay after the difficult news she's received, even if she insists she's fine. To cheer them up, the doctor offered treats, which brought a few smiles. But the reality of their situation crashed down on them once they were back in the car. Tobias tells Alma he has a meeting later and asks if she can pick up Ella. Alma readily agrees. Ahmed and Jade are later spotted together during one of the grueling training sessions for the competition, but the stress and pressure begin to take over. Despite Jade's suggestion to take a break, the chef insists on continuing, believing that a fresh start is the best way to handle the situation. Finally, she agrees to take a break and heads to the parking lot where the chemotherapy makes her vomit. As Almut continues training, pushing herself beyond her goals, her daughter Ayla waits in the rain with her teacher. Upon arriving home, the woman finds a brief respite from stress, but the reality of Dubai confronts her directly. He's curious about her whereabouts, having called the restaurant to inquire about her, but not receiving any information. Ahmed suddenly remembers she forgot to pick up her daughter from school. Overwhelmed with guilt, she starts apologizing profusely, while her husband patiently waits for her to explain. In the end, she admits to practicing for the competition he'd asked her to delay. Her eyes well up with tears as she confesses the truth. Tobias questions her about how long she's focused on cooking instead of recovering, wondering if the hospital knew about this. While she believes it wouldn't make much difference if she told them or not, Tobias becomes frustrated and urges her to face her cancer diagnosis. He tells her to stop stressing and accept the reality of her situation. He finds her logic confusing, but Almut asserts that she understands it perfectly. She's aware her odds of getting better aren't great, and she's determined to live out her dreams before it's too late. Tobias believes that he and their daughter aren't enough for her, and anger fills his mind. He can't figure out why Almut keeps putting herself in dangerous situations. Overwhelmed with emotion, she tells him she doesn't want to be remembered as just a deceased mother and wants to leave behind a lasting memory for her daughter. She admits to fighting hard to stay optimistic, but her deepest desire is for her daughter to remember her as a strong woman, not just the difficult times she endured during her recovery. She wants her relationship with Ella to be remembered fondly, not tainted by the pain of her illness, even though she fears being forgotten. The words that once stung like daggers now soften, both holding back their anger and choosing to talk calmly at the table. Tobias understands that Almut wants to be remembered for her achievements, but he warns her that neither he nor their daughter will be able to remember her if they don't really know what's going on. Alma admits her error, and Dubai inquires about the competition's schedule. He tells her the date, and she apologizes because it clashes with their wedding day. His heart sank as he went outside and tossed the invitations, their carefully crafted plans discarded, leaving him utterly heartbroken. One morning, during her run, she jogs past a skating rink that sparks some fond memories. He welcomes her at Jade's apartment, sporting a new haircut just like hers, a gesture of unwavering support. Jade's nerves got the best of her on competition day, and she ended up throwing up in a bucket. They burst into the kitchen, zipping around amidst a throng of cheering people. Amidst the cheering crowd, Almut catches sight of her family, her unwavering supporters. They have 5.5 hours to help her present her most beautiful and intricate creations. They must work tirelessly in the kitchen for hours. As the clock neared its final seconds, Almut's nervousness was evident, leading her to seek Jade's assistance. Their combined efforts resulted in a nail-biting finish just before time ran out. Both of them are bursting with excitement. Tobias is beaming with joy, and Almut finally feels like she's made a real difference before her time is up. She lingers in the moment, savoring it before removing her chef's hat, giving Jade a final embrace, and joining her family in the audience to make some last memories. The rink she'd spotted a few days before beckoned, and the moment they stepped onto the ice was pure magic. She cherishes the time spent with her daughter and husband, creating lasting memories until she bids farewell and departs. Eventually, the unavoidable occurred. Alma is no longer with us, but Tobias and Ella have welcomed a new dog into their family. They are attempting to move forward with their lives, but he's showing her his mother's trick for cracking eggs on a flat surface.